show.
Thank you.
All right. One of the things that was very fascinating to me early along was getting access to this insider, Daniel. He called his project Phoenix 3. He claims to have worked at Brookhaven National Labs on Montauk Point, Long Island. Most people call it the Montauk Project. And as I said, it was a seat from a UFO hooked up to a very powerful set of transformers. And the person operating the chair, it would amplify their psychic ability, and they could manifest things in the room or create a portal that would take somebody through space or time. In the course of this long amount of conversation that I had with Daniel on the subject, he often described some very unusual anomalies that would happen to the human body as it's put through these portals. Now, I'll just start out our discussion by saying that in the conventional view, if you are biologically 30 years old, and then you get sent into the future and your body is sent into the future, you would think that your body will be 30 years old at that time you go in the future. Is that what happens based on your knowledge? Or is there something else that happens?
In my personal case, I was involved in what they called the 20 and back program. And it was explained early on that I would serve 20 years and then, as strange as it sounds, be age regressed and brought back to the original point in time that I left and deposited back into my life with the give or take a few minutes of the time I left.
But there's a problem, because you've aged 20 years while you're out there in space.
Right. And what happens is at the end of your 20 years, and in my case it was more like 21, they take you back to the Lunar Operation Command, where you go through a massive debriefing, sign more papers, and then they take you and put you in a table and they sedate you and basically paralyze your body to where you cannot move. You have to be completely still throughout the process. And they put up these thin, almost like cardboard boards. You're strapped to like this kind of like a foam support, and then they put these like similar and look like weight, the way they were handling them, to like cardboard like boards around the shape of your body. And the process took about 2 weeks. And in this time period, they somehow technologically regressed your body back to 20 years to the time of when you joined. And during this time, some people had gotten tattoos, scars, injuries that would disappear. And
really,
you would be regressed back. People that have been put through this, when they've been back in, after they've been deposited back into their previous life, or this life that we know here, and they're undergoing hypnosis or memory regression, they'll have scars appear on their body during the process that will appear and then go away. Or tattoos, outlines of red scar tattoos that will appear for a short period of time and then go away. And it's some sort of cellular memory that's happening.
You didn't know this when you came forward, but many years ago, all the way back around 2000, I had read a really weird book online called The Mars Records. And it was a guy, and at the time there was no other data I had to correlate with this, but it didn't sound like he was lying. Just intuitively, it didn't feel like it was wrong. He was describing being in exactly what you're talking about now, the secret space program. He only got very slight memories of being around Mars, having some kind of psychic killing that he could do, a psychic termination technique involving telekinesis that he was very good at. He would fry people's synapses. And he reported that at the end of the assignment that he had in the 1970s, that he went through a 20-year age regression, that they brought him back to the time that he left. He'd worked for 20 years, and they age regressed him. This is exactly what you said. Were you familiar with people getting some kind of psychic training that could allow them to fry people's synapses?
Absolutely. And there are stations that they sit or stand at that enhance their abilities. And this is one of the weapon systems. And those that are trained in remote viewing and remote influencing, I mentioned it's like an anode cathode. One is made out of copper. One is made out of like a stainless steel or another metal. They place their hands on it, and then they focus their minds on a target, and they are able to kill the targets in several different ways, and multiple targets as well. And just like people that use fly drones and kill people now, a lot of these people are lied to about the targets that they're taking out. But yes, that is a very real but hard to believe technology and weapon system. And some of these same people are trained to protect facilities from remote viewers. People that are very much in the know, remote viewers that have tried to remote view facilities and just couldn't do it. We call them those who scatter. They're trained in scattering remote viewers' thoughts. So, and this is also done through technological enhancement. But that very much lines up with what he was doing.
Are you a super soldier?
No. I am absolutely not a super soldier. There are people that fall under that category. I have worked alongside of those types of people, but I was under a totally different umbrella. Under the same umbrella, everyone throws all my labs under the same umbrella. If you're a my lab, you must be a super soldier. When people associate me with super soldiers, I just get frustrated. That's not what I was about. That's not what I did.
There was a super soldier book I read a long time ago, and I had no idea if it was really credible or not. It was way back in the early 2000s. The guy reported some pretty strange sounding stuff. One of the things he seemed to say was that he was trained to, if needed, be able to land without a parachute from a big fall, and claimed that his legs could spring off the ground, that he could bounce and not be, destroyed by the impact. It didn't sound credible to me.
The super soldiers I worked with, I saw them do some incredible things. And I never saw them. That doesn't sound. I don't know.
Well, I don't think we can do a whole super soldier episode, but I would like to hear what cool stuff could they do that's beyond normal human capability. Let's get into that a little bit.
They definitely would be able to get into the minds of their targets. They would be able to psychically work as a group with their team. They were able to not quite move like in the Matrix, but they were definitely, their muscles were enhanced to where they were very quick and very lethal. But it was not superhuman. It was just enhanced human.
One of the things that Pete Peterson told me he was personally involved in was some sort of training that I gather they developed out of the East, where people were able to blank out their minds and they could actually let their body operate instinctively and catch a bullet that was fired at them with a glove, even though they would have to start moving their arm before the trigger was actually pulled.
I've seen that done.
Really? What's the process behind something like that?
When you totally blank out your mind, you're going to the instinctive part of your brain that we talked about earlier, to where, like, if a rock is coming at your head, they've measured neurologically that your brain reacts like 1/10 of a second before it hits you.
Right.
These people have been trained to get in contact and work with their mental abilities in such a way that they're really almost able to dodge bullets and move in a way that is very amazing. But that what you just described is not outside the realms of what is possible for a lot of these guys and girls. There's a lot of women too.
Some super soldiers have apparently called themselves ninjas and claim that they got some kind of ninjutsu training. Is that true?
Trained in multiple martial arts.
Have you heard of samurai soldiers being trained to have an accurate sword fight while blindfolded and not able to visibly see?
Yes, a lot of this sounds like Jedi, Luke Skywalker with the lightsaber, with the little robot flying around shooting lasers at him. But there's all of this type of training is very much involved. Yeah, I didn't go through this, but I've heard all of them describe going through similar type stuff.
Is part of why somebody would be called a super soldier that there is some augmentation of their physical body? Are they part titanium, part cyborg?
No, they do get injections. They're enhanced. They're mentally trained and enhanced. But the super soldier part is just like being the elite of the elite of the elite of the elite. It does take a super toll on them later on. They don't have a huge life expectancy.
Could these guys hold their breath for longer periods of time than most of us could?
Mm-hmm.
Could they dive deeper into water than most of us could without having problems?
They can handle thinner air. Yeah, all of these things.
These injections, are they based on some sort of advanced extraterrestrial technology that sort of amps up the body in unusual ways?
It's a combination. Some of it is completely chemical, and some of it is nanotechnology.
Really?
Yeah.
If nanites are being used, would that then mean that these super soldiers are vulnerable to the AI infection?
They are vulnerable.
So getting back now to this time problem. The bizarre thing that Daniel told me was that in the early days of the Montauk project, they found that if you push somebody into the future, and they would normally be 70 years old, let's say, at that time in our future, and you then time travel them to that point, that their physical body will suddenly age very rapidly, apparently in a matter of days or sometimes even hours, to the age of 70. Had you encountered any information like that?
I have encountered information like that, and also a lot of information about people who have traveled that are doing temporal traveling, suffering from what I've mentioned before, the temporal dementia, and them coming up with ways around it, and they did, with injections that helped. I believed it was some sort of genetic telomere therapy that prevented this or slowed it from occurring.
Well, let's go back just for a moment to the age progression.
Regression?
No, progression.
Okay.
Somebody goes forward and they would be 70 normally, and then their body suddenly ages.
Okay.
I have a lot of specific information from Daniel that we could get into about what he was told for why that was happening. I'm curious if you heard any of the theory, or if they had an understanding of why that would occur. Is there a reason for that happening? Why wouldn't your body just stay the same if you go into the future? If it's you at one time and you go into another time, why wouldn't your body still be the same age it was when you left?
It is still, I believe, a large mystery to a lot of the people that don't take into account consciousness and when you consciously know where you belong and where you've been taken, your consciousness plays in to, your consciousness is connected to your body. And I have heard of what you have mentioned about the zero time reference, but I don't know a whole lot about it specifically.
What did you hear about the zero time reference? I'm just curious.
That your physiology, your body, and your consciousness, mind, body, spirit, complex, I guess you would call it, all three have to be in harmony together. And when you start screwing around with temporal technologies and you take the body and move it forward or backward in this illusionary time, that the mind, body, spirit complex gets all out of whack, gets skewed.
Well, let me just share with you what Daniel told me about the zero time reference, because it appears this is an area where we have some overlap that you didn't hear everything. Supposedly at the time of conception, that's the only point where the soul and the physical body are joined in what he called an expanding time cone. He also said, and he said this was really important in his psychic training program, that when they want you to go to the quiet point in yourself, that they want you to dial back to that moment when the soul and the body inhabit the same quanta, the same location. He said that the age of the physical body is actually not biologically based as much as it's based on the width of the cone. So you're conceived here, and then as you age naturally, it's like your soul age is going up this way and your biological age is going down this way, and the condition of your physical body is a function of the distance between these 2 points. So if you move to a further point in time, it appears that nature has a self-corrective mechanism so that you can't create a paradox by becoming able to live longer than you naturally would in your own natural life anyway. So it's like an error-fixing mechanism built into the nature of the universe because these portals do exist.
Yeah. Sounds like a lot more complex way of explaining what I was saying about the mind, body, spirit connection having to be in sync.
He also said that there were certain technological means that have been developed with the help of extraterrestrials to shift the ZTR so that people could be taken somewhere else and not have this sudden aging or sudden youthening happen to them. Have you heard of that being possible, that you could be transported past the time that you normally would have died into the future and still be okay?
Yeah, I've heard they've found ways around it, but I'm sure that it hasn't just been from human engineering that they have found ways to do this. We work hand in hand with so many different extraterrestrials that it's not a stretch of the imagination that extraterrestrials have had a hand in helping us engineer this wave they've found around this problem.
You said that buffers were put onto these ships that had the time warp capability.
Well, all temporal technology.
Were there cases before this happened where people were jumping back into the past and looking at Earth historical events, certain noteworthy events?
Usually it was unintentional situations to where people were making long jumps away and coming back and then arriving back at Earth at the wrong time. And they had to fix that. Usually when people are traveling back in time to look at things, that was a part of a lot of some of the temporal programs that were eventually shut down.
Daniel described people wanting to go back and see if Jesus was actually crucified. Did you ever hear anything like that, if people tried to do that, or other heavily noteworthy historical events?
Are you talking about Looking Glass?
Well, this was actually a Montauk jump. This was somebody actually going through a Montauk portal to see the crucifixion and just kind of step in there.
No, I'm not familiar with that.
How about Looking Glass? Did you hear about people trying to see things like the crucifixion in Looking Glass?
Yeah, in Looking Glass, I heard that people were trying to look at just about every historical event that you could think of, especially a lot of the ones that require a little bit of faith, that some that are questionable if it happened or not, to verify.
Everybody's on the edge of their seat now, so what were the results? Or did they vary person by person based on their beliefs?
Yes.
Really?
Like I said, time is very much consciousness-based. Looking into the future and looking into the past, you're going to often see a timeline in the past or in the future that is based on the consciousness and the belief system of the viewer. I did not see reports on Jesus specifically, but there were other things. I believe the assassination of Lincoln was mentioned.
Oh.
That there were different reports of what was seen. I can't remember exactly, and a few other incidents going back way further in time. And they were finally figuring out that it depended on who was viewing the past event, and their preconceived idea and belief had a lot to do with what they saw, especially when it came to things that were theological in nature.
Did anyone go and look at Valley Forge or the signing of the Declaration of Independence, the Looking Glass, things like that?
Declaration of Independence, yeah, a lot of those things were listed. There was a whole lot of things listed that people had seen that you could expand on and look at, and I really didn't look that deeply into them.
The show Doctor Who, even I forget, it was in the mid-2000s that it had already been the longest running program in British television history, something like 22 or 24 years, and they're doing it again now. And it appears they're now actually mixing Doctor Who and Game of Thrones together and mixing characters. Doctor Who is traveling around in a telephone booth that's like a portal that they call the TARDIS. Daniel was saying there was tons of stuff in Doctor Who. Yeah,
there's been E.T. craft that on the inside are larger than the outside of the craft.
That's exactly what we see in the TARDIS. He goes into this little telephone booth and he gets inside and it's this huge room.
Yeah.
So do you think that whoever is doing these shows is trying to get us ready for cosmic disclosure in the future?
Some of it is to plant a seed in our subconscious to get us ready for disclosure, and some of it is to discredit people that start to come forward. And one thing I wanted to mention when it comes to, there are a lot of people that have gone through the age regression and have done the 20 and back program that have gone through the blank slating process. And I've mentioned 3 to 5% of people, blank slating doesn't work.
Right.
But for those who have gone through that, it did work on, there's a number of ways to tell. Usually you look younger, like if you're 45 years old, a lot of people think you're 35 or 38 years old. You age well to a certain age, and then you age really quickly. You have quite a few neurological problems that you start developing usually around between the age of 30 and 40 years old. You start to get maybe like, it'll start out with carpal tunnel, you'll start getting nerve issues in your extremities, seizure issues are very prevalent. Eye problems. Some people start having weird problems where some of their internal organs start to break down a little bit. You start to have a lot of biological and especially neurological issues later on in life.
My space program insider Jacob told me not too long ago that the health technology that they have in the space program is now so advanced that even if you're paralyzed from the neck down, they can actually regrow your nerve fibers, and it'll all just grow from that origin and just reroute itself through your body. Have you encountered anything like that? Is that actually true?
Yeah, and it's very frustrating to me that, especially when I visit the LOC, that I know for a fact that probably 3 floors below me is technology that could fix some of the problems that I have, but the technology has been denied to me. A little bit of the sour grapes they have that I have been forced on them. When I've asked for this technology for myself and for actually some family members that have been diagnosed recently, they tell me, you don't work for us.
Jacob also reported vats of replacement arms and legs and other limbs that were grown to be like blanks. And if you get your arm blown off in service or something, that they can graft on a new one and that it will snap into your DNA signature and become like your own arm again. Are you familiar with that?
I've known people that have had limbs blown off and they've lost limbs, and they've had almost like a gelatin mold that has been holographically grown onto their body. Usually what I was seeing and what I know was being used at the LOC and also on, I guess you would call them hospital ships, were a holographic field around gelatin regrew your nerves and rebuilt your limb that was needed.
Why do you think they're not releasing this technology to humanity if it would be so beneficial?
The same reason that they're weaponizing our food.
They want less, not more.
They want less, not more of us.
I'm sure that as time goes on, and I say this lovingly, that there's going to be more and more people who are claiming to be channeling, and they're going to say that they're channeling the Alliance, or they're channeling the beings that are working with the Alliance, whether it's the blue avians or the blue orb beings or the golden triangle head beings or the sphere beings, whatever.
Or the 2 that haven't appeared yet. That's already happening. Yeah.
Okay. Not everybody, but there are some people out there who are ufologists who seem to have some really nice rose-colored glasses they're wearing, right? And they're seeing everything is great. Everything is so beautiful. Oh, it's the Alliance. Okay. Your experience, though, we need to get this on public record, because the sphere beings appear to be coming from a much higher level. They haven't just rubber-stamped the Alliance, have they? First of all, they didn't want to talk to them even, except through you, is what you've been telling us.
And Gonzalez.
Right. So what was the reason why these sphere beings didn't want to talk to the Alliance directly, if these Alliance people are heroes that are going to save the Earth?
These people originally worked for what I guess many are calling the Cabal. They worked directly for the secret Earth government and their syndicates.
Some people would say the Illuminati.
Yes, the
Very
Illuminati.
scary sounding word.
These people were not and are not angels or angelic people by any means. Yes, they have turned over a new leaf. They have been oppressed enough. They have seen enough oppression to where they have decided to turn on their former masters, and they want to bring a new era to humanity. But these people are still very damaged, and many of them, the Alliance is also a group, isn't just one group. It's a, there are a bunch of people that have defected from several different space programs that have formed this secret space program alliance. And a lot of them have come from bad, worse, and way worse groups. And their tactics, their agenda, their own agendas now are not completely service to others. They're service to self still. And the Sphere Being Alliance with other ETs and this SSP Alliance have said that these groups, even though they are working for the common good, they're still a certain percentage agenda-oriented and service to self, and they did not want to deal with them directly.
You said that the people in the military faction of the space program were told that the stuff that's in the sky is ours?
Right.
And what were they told about extraterrestrials?
Some of them were told that the Roswell crash was real, that there are, some are told that there are 4 ET groups visiting us. Some believe there are, I think, 56 or 58 ET groups visiting us. It just depends on the program they're in.
I actually have contact with Hoagland's top insider, Richard Hoagland's top insider. He contacted me all the way back, I guess, in 2008 or something, when I did a conference in Joshua Tree. And he swears up and down that the only ETs were the ancient builder race and that all the stuff that's up there in the sky is ours. And it was funny because you said that exact same thing to me about some of the military faction.
Some of the lower military factions, especially the space command groups, like in the Air Force, some of these groups, they believe that every single thing they're tracking in space is man-made. They believe they've been read in at the highest level, and if you tell them otherwise, they're ready to fight you. They believe fervently that they are at the top of the totem pole, that they have the top of the notch clearance, and they know, they have the need to know, and there's nothing above them that they don't know about.
What is the NRO here on Earth?
The NRO is basically the equivalent of the Air Force's Space Command.
So the NRO, National Reconnaissance Office, is a naval-based intelligence organization?
Right. They're involved with geoengineering, geospatial engineering, tracking tracking things in near Earth orbit, and they have lower-level space programs that fly what they think are top-of-the-line space vehicles, and there are space stations that are in near Earth orbit, upper near Earth orbit, that are a little bit more advanced than the ISS that they're flying to and from, and they believe that's as high as it goes.
Some insiders seem to think that the NRO is where the buck stops, that it's like the biggest organization in the intelligence community when you're dealing with space matters. It doesn't sound like you feel that's true.
No, there are select individuals in the NRO that have higher knowledge.
If we saw one of these space platforms that are in Earth orbit that the NRO possesses, and it was decloaked or unmasked, would it look futuristic and bizarre to us?
If if they were to do some sort of disclosure and say, this is our secret space program, as a way to trick us and show these craft, these space planes, and these space stations, yeah, we would think they're pretty advanced, but they're probably up to 50 years more advanced than like the International Space Station.
Now, I'm sure you're familiar with a story that popped up on the radar of people paying attention. Most people probably ignored it, where the NRO donated 3 telescopes to NASA that were significantly more advanced than the Hubble Space Telescope. And they said, these are obsolete to us, we don't need them. Mm-hmm. Do you think that they were trying to send a message to people by doing that? And if so, what kind of message might that have been sending?
I don't know if they intended to send a message, but it certainly did. And when NASA mothballed them and said, we don't have the money to staff a project to run these new satellites, I mean, come on. Why wouldn't you take people off of the Hubble and put them on something that's more than 10 times powerful than the Hubble? It just doesn't make sense.
The question would become, if they have stuff 10 times more powerful than the Hubble, are they stargazing? Are they just counting up the stars and galaxies?
Why would the military want to count stars?
It would imply that there's something out there that they're very interested in looking at.
Mm-hmm. And at one point, people were asking questions, the SDI weapons that were being put into outer space, they were asking why 2/3 of them, of these weapons that don't exist, were being pointed outwards instead of inwards,
very good
towards
point.
the Earth.
Here's another thing that Jacob told me, which I've never shared publicly before, and it's going to sound really outrageous, and I accept that. He said that he was aware of the space program having, I guess you could call it telescope technology, that was so powerful that you could actually detect buildings and surface features on planets far away from the Earth. Did you ever encounter anything like that?
It wasn't optical telescopic imaging, but they had imaging systems that were able to do that type of reconnaissance.
So we can essentially look around and see what's going on out there.
Right.
Let's go back to ancient Greece for a second, and let's talk about some of the secret societies there where, and I read this in New World Order, The Ancient Plan of Secret Societies by William T. Still, where he says that in these secret orders, they would have all the guys go out in one night and everybody would chisel off the penises on these Greek god statues. Then everybody wakes up in the morning, they're horrified that this has been done. And the secret society would say, if any of you guys squeal, we're going to blame all of this on you. And it's called common criminality. Is common criminality being used in the space program? Is everybody tainted to some degree with stuff that they've had to do?
Of any syndicate, of any group that is a tenant, yes, they get you to do unspeakable things to where you entwine yourself so deeply that you can't, if you speak out, you'll self-incriminate yourself.
Is this one of the ways that the secret Earth government syndicates thought they could ensure that we would never find out about the space program because nobody's clean in the space program? They're all dirty. They've all got horrible things they've been forced to do?
Definitely. Like I said, every single person that is in the secret space program alliance has done horrible things that maybe in a way they're trying to make up for now.
Well, you heard it right here. That's all the time we have for this episode. There's a lot more where this came from coming up next time on Cosmic Disclosure, because you need to know. I'm your host, David Wilcock. We're here with Corey Goode, and we thank you for watching.
And back program. And it was explained early on that I would serve 20 years and then, as strange as it sounds, be age regressed and brought back to the original point in time that I left and deposited back into my life with the give or take a few minutes of the time I left.
But there's a problem, because you've aged 20 years while you're out there in space.
Right. And what happens is at the end of your 20 years, and in my case it was more like 21, they take you back to the Lunar Operation Command, where you go through a massive debriefing, sign more papers, and then they take you and put you in a table and they sedate you and basically paralyze your body to where you cannot move. You have to be completely still throughout the process. And they put up these thin, almost like cardboard boards. You're strapped to like this, kind of like a foam support. And then they put these like similar and look like weight, the way they were handling them, to like cardboard like boards around the shape of your body. And the process took about 2 weeks. And in this time period, they somehow technologically regressed your body back to 20 years to the time of when you joined. And during this time, some people had gotten tattoos, scars, injuries that would disappear. And
really,
you would be regressed back. People that have been put through this, when they've been back in, after they've been deposited back into their previous life, or this life that we know here, and they're undergoing hypnosis or memory regression, they'll have scars appear on their body during the process that will appear and then go away. Or tattoos, outlines of red scar tattoos that will appear for a short period of time and then go away. And it's some sort of cellular memory that's happening.
You didn't know this when you came forward, but many years ago, all the way back around 2000, I had read a really weird book online called The Mars Records. And it was a guy, and at the time there was no other data I had to correlate with this, but it didn't sound like he was lying. Just intuitively, it didn't feel like it was wrong. He was describing being in exactly what you're talking about now, the secret space program. He only got very slight memories of being around Mars, having some kind of psychic killing that he could do, a psychic termination technique involving telekinesis that he was very good at. He would fry people's synapses. And he reported that at the end of the assignment that he had in the 1970s, that he went through a 20-year age regression, that they brought him back to the time that he left. He'd worked for 20 years, and they age regressed him. This is exactly what you said. Were you familiar with people getting some kind of psychic training that could allow them to fry people's synapses?
Absolutely. And there are stations that they sit or stand at that enhance their abilities. And this is one of the weapon systems. And those that are trained in remote viewing and remote influencing, I mentioned it's like an anode cathode. One is made out of copper. One is made out of like a stainless steel or another metal. They place their hands on it, and then they focus their minds on a target, and they are able to kill the targets in several different ways, and multiple targets as well. And just like people that use fly drones and kill people now, a lot of these people are lied to about the targets that they're taking out. But yes, that is a very real but hard to believe technology and weapon system. And some of these same people are trained to protect facilities from remote viewers. People that are very much in the know, remote viewers that have tried to remote view facilities and just couldn't do it. We call them those who scatter. They're trained in scattering remote viewers' thoughts.
The show.
Thank you.
All right. One of the things that was very fascinating to me early along was getting access to this insider, Daniel, he called his project Phoenix 3. He claims to have worked at Brookhaven National Labs on Montauk Point, Long Island. Most people call it the Montauk Project. And as I said, it was a seat from a UFO hooked up to a very powerful set of transformers. And the person operating the chair, it would amplify their psychic ability, and they could manifest things in the room or create a portal that would take somebody through space or time. In the course of this long amount of conversation that I had with Daniel on the subject, he often described some very unusual anomalies that would happen to the human body as it's put through these portals. Now, I'll just start out our discussion by saying that in the conventional view, if you are biologically 30 years old, and then you get sent into the future and your body is sent into the future, you would think that your body will be 30 years old at that time you go in the future. Is that what happens based on your knowledge? Or is there something else that happens?
In my personal case, I was involved in what they called the